And so by having education at the best place where it can be, which is at the states, the local levels, with governors, with best practices and tools, which I hope the Department of Education can help supply for them, we'll do it.
That, of course, was Education Secretary Linda McMahon yesterday saying we should return decisions on education back to the states, get it closer to the parents and the students where it belongs. This after President Trump is being sued for moving to dismantle the Education Department. Of course, he's being sued. Joining us now, Children's Scholarship Fund President Darla Romfo. What a pleasure to see you, Darla. Thank you for being here. Just get to the crux of the matter, first of all, which is that American people are dissatisfied, as they should be, with public education. 73% of Americans say they are dissatisfied with public education. And here's the reason why. The meeting just the basic standards, public education meeting basic standards, only in the fourth grade, 31%. That's all meet the basic standards in reading, 39% in math. For grade 8, it's even worse, only 30% meet the basic standards for reading, only 22% for math. With a world that's becoming more scientific, how can we survive as a nation like that?
Well, we can't. And don't you think it's interesting that all this hysteria that's being directed at President Trump now? Where was the hysteria 3 weeks ago when we got these, or a month ago when we got these NAEP scores? That should be what you're out there protesting about. There's something very odd about protesting him trying to close the Department of Ed when it's never been shown that federal dollars or federal programs do one thing to improve student outcomes. The Department of Ed has been around all this time where we're looking at the scores plummeting and plummeting and plummeting. And this isn't a new conversation. You know, 25 years ago, they were looking at whether or not the Department of Ed was necessary. And there was a study done, Education at the Crossroads, and it said, by the way, federal programs don't seem to have any effect on the outcomes for students. What does have an effect? Parents being involved, strong focus on academic standards, local control, money into the classrooms. And by the way, this federal money, I don't think a lot of people understand this, because the numbers about people who, they might be dissatisfied with public education, but the numbers about people who are very worried about the Department of Education closing, those are high. And I think it's just misunderstanding. Everyone, it's not going to improve your children's student outcomes by having the Department of Education in place.
Well, and you mentioned 25 years. I can go back further than that, because I was teaching junior high in Chicago in the late 1970s, shortly after the Department of Education was created. What they forced us to do, they didn't force us, but they bribed the local school district. They said, we'll give you $2 million if you use this study aid that we have, which were terrible. Even back then, they were terrible. So they were driving schools to do stuff that the teachers that I was working with said that didn't work. So it goes all the way back then.
And it was never created because there was some big policy discussion that this department was needed to do anything to improve student outcomes. It was a political deal between the President Carter and the teachers' unions.
It's all about the teachers' unions.
It's never been about the
political control. Well, getting to the politics of it, the president can't just eliminate it without the help of Congress. He's got to get, and it's got to be, what, 61 votes in the Senate, which means that he's got to get more votes than he'll get from Schumer. Schumer is not likely to vote in favor of getting rid of that, even though he might have been at one point, particularly with the push that he's got from the left. So how do you convince about 8 Democrats to go along with Republicans?
Well, I'd start somewhere else. There's something you only need 50 votes for in the Senate, and that would be to pass the Educational Choice for Children Act, which would allow school choice to go across all 50 states. It's a tax credit that would allow scholarship granting organizations to use that money to provide scholarships to parents, putting that power back into the hands of parents.
And by the way, just so folks know out there, your organization provided 300,000 scholarships for really dynamic kids that don't have the money for private or parochial schools. So you know what you're talking about.
I know that it works. I mean, we have story after story after story. And when you're saying that people aren't satisfied with public education, the parental satisfaction that we see is like 90%. People are satisfied with the schools that their kids go to. And people think, parents don't want to be engaged. Well, I think a lot of parents are just hopeless. They don't know what to do. They don't have a way to escape.
The Educational Choice for Children Act, call your congressman, and the Children's Scholarship Fund. You may want to look into it for a donation if you need a place to send money. Darla, thank you very much.